Now, new controversial aged care reforms could be the biggest shake-up for the sector in decades. But should wealthier Australians be made to pay more for their care? Rachel Lane is the author of Downsizing Made Simple and a principal with Aged Care Gurus who educate and support professionals on all matters related to retirement living and aged care. Rachel, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So the government's going to introduce its new Aged Care Act on the 1st of July, it seems. So it's the first time since 1997 major reforms are taking place. We know that something needs to be done with the aged care system because it is unsustainable and it's also not great quality in a lot of areas. What do these reforms or this proposal suggest?
Look, there's not enough detail in the proposal to really know what people are going to pay, and that's cause for concern. So the government published the draft legislation, so the draft of the new Aged Care Act, and they had that open for consultation from December until the end of last week when consultation closed. And when consultation closed, they still hadn't provided the sections of the new legislation that cover the fees and funding arrangements. So it's really getting to a point now where you start to think, well, are they not telling us because they don't know, or are they telling us because they know and they know that people are going to be really cranky about it, so they're just going to try and implement it without consultation, which is actually really frightening.
Well, I mean, it is because, I've read too, Rachel, that it's a pretty complex series of fees to be paid, and then they haven't really said at what level you become wealthy and who these people would be that are considered the wealthy baby boomers. Do you think, though, Australians would be in favour of paying more if they're assured of higher quality care, or does this create a two-tiered system?
Look, and that I think is the crux. I think at the end of the day, most people are willing to pay more if they think they're going to get more care, or they're going to get better care, or they're going to get both. They're going to get more care and it's going to be better. I think some of the proposals that are in this aged care task force are talking about substantially increasing the cost of aged care. So they've got recommendations in there like lifting the RAD price at which you need government approval from $550,000 to $750,000.
Can you explain what that is, the RAD price?
Sure. So RAD stands for Refundable Accommodation Deposit. It's the lump sum that you can be paid for your aged care, that you can pay for your aged care accommodation. You can choose to pay it by a lump sum or a daily payment or a mixture of the two. But the aged care facilities need to get approval if they want to set that price at the moment above $550,000. The report's saying that actually that should be $750,000.
Okay, so even more.
Yeah, $200,000 more before government would need to approve that that's the price that's fair.
Okay. So what does that ultimately mean for people who are going into aged care?
Well, I guess what we've seen with the introduction of that, they call it market price cap. With the introduction of that market price cap, we've sort of seen a clustering of pricing at that cap. So I guess what we would see is that most of those $550,000 aged care beds would go up to $750,000 is what I would expect to see.
That's quite a big jump.
It's a huge jump. The other thing that they're talking about is at the moment when you pay, let's say you pay $550,000 as a refundable deposit, you get all of that $550,000 back. What they're talking about is allowing a 3% per annum deduction from your lump sum. So on $550,000, that would be $16,500 a year that would be deducted from your $550,000.
Right. So, I mean, it depends on how long you stay in that facility for, or that residential space for. But that's quite the fee.
Yeah, they're talking about capping it after 5 years, but even after 5 years, that would be $82,500. And again, that's based on the $550,000 figure. If you're in, Melbourne metropolitan area, your RAD price could easily be $1 million or more, which means that you could easily be looking at double that.
So, Rachel, look, this is a really thorny issue because we know that the aged care system is not financially sustainable, not even looking at some of the other issues that are in there at the moment. So who should be paying for it, and how do we make it fair? Because I guess this is what this whole task force was tasked with finding out. And they have decided not to put a 1% levy across the taxpayer base. So, what do you make of that?
Yeah, look, I don't disagree with that, in that, we do have a shrinking taxpayer percentage, the proportion of people over 65 relative to the number of taxpayers is growing substantially. So I don't necessarily disagree with that, but we need more detail on the means testing arrangements, because at the moment, in order to pay the market price for your aged care accommodation, you just need to have assets more than $197,735.
Right. So that's most homes.
Well, it is most homes, but that means that someone with 200,000 or 300,000 can pay 550,000 in the current world, and someone with 300,000 could potentially be asked to pay 750,000 for their aged care bed in the new world.
Right.
We need to know, okay, if you're going to introduce these changes, how are you going to apply the means test to ensure that this is affordable? It's one thing to make the system sustainable, but at the moment we have a system where people who are recognised by the formula as being of low means are paying huge amounts, between $58,500 and $197,000 of assets. They're paying 17.5% of their assets towards their aged care accommodation. It's really not fair.
Well, we've got a lot of people texting in and calling in on this, Rachel. This has clearly touched a real nerve because hopefully all of us will be faced with this problem at some point, and it isn't just...
In the meantime, we have to do it for our parents, right?
Indeed we do. Do we have to, though, Rachel, open up a broader conversation, though, you're talking about parents, between children and their parents, around that long-held belief that the family home is a legacy that should be passed down and should be preserved for the next generation at all costs. We're talking about assets, but it's kind of a sacred cow, really, in Australia, isn't it?
It is. For a lot of people, it's still something that they view as their financial legacy. Yep. So they're happy to spend their super, their shares, their cash, their term deposit, all the rest of it, but they really do view their house as that financial legacy to pass down to the next generation.
Yep.
I think we need to challenge that kind of way of thinking, and the only way to do that is to open up the conversation between generations. But the other thing that we need to do is we need to create financial incentives for people to live in age-appropriate homes. There's a huge disincentive for people to leave the family home when they're getting an age pension, because if you go over the pension asset threshold, your pension reduces by $7,800 a year for every $100,000 of assets. Now, you can't earn that in the bank or in a term deposit. In a lot of cases, you can't even earn that in your shares. So that we've got to remove those disincentives to encourage people to live in housing that is safe, that is secure, that is age-friendly, because a lot of the time the home they're living in is not safe, secure and age-friendly. But also we need to free up that housing stock so that instead of having one person rattling around like a bean in a can in a 4-bedroom home, we can free that up for a family of, mum, dad and 2 or 3 kids. So there's a bigger picture to all of this that really does need to be addressed.
Rachel, we're not going to solve this problem, unfortunately, on the program today, but look, your expertise is really appreciated, and I'm sure we'll get you on at another time when we maybe have a little bit more detail about what is proposed. I'd really love to have you back on again, if you will.
Sure, love to.
Terrific, thank you. Rachel Lane is she's a bit of an expert in this space. She's the author of a book called Downsizing Made Simple, and she's a principal with Aged Care Gurus, who educate and support people on all matters related to retirement living and aged care. She's been immersed in this space for a long time, but yes, she says the detail is just not there at the moment on what this would actually mean, what these changes would mean. They're supposed to come through on the 1st of July if the government adopts everything that as it has been sort of delivered